What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast from the Action Network and Fantasy Labs. I am your host, Chris Raybon. It's time for Super Bowl 60 player projections. Momentarily, I'll be joined by one of the most accurate fantasy rankers, projectors in the industry, the odds maker, Sean Koerner. We're going to go over our projections for every player. We got time. We got one game left, so we're going to dive in deep. But quick reminder, all of our fantasy football content is available right now over at fantasylabs.com. That goes for our DFS content as well. And Fantasy Labs has a new feature, Pick Labs, and it's live. Pick Labs lets you scan the best player prop and pick 'em bets in seconds. Everything's broken down for you from edges, win rates, value. It's a clean board showing which plays stand out across sports books and sites like Underdog and Prize Picks as well. And when you see something you like, Pick Labs builds the slip and sends it straight to the book of your choice. For a limited time, you could get free access by signing up for a Fantasy Labs DFS subscription. Just visit fantasylabs.com/pricing and use code FLEX20 to get $20 off your first payment. Again, that's code FLEX20, FLEX20 for 20 cash off at fantasylabs.com/pricing. Koerner, what is up, my man? Happy Super Bowl 60. How you feeling heading into the Pro Bowl not being on a Sunday next week?
Yeah, I mean, we finally made it. It is the Super Bowl. I can't wait. A lot of the prop markets I look for haven't been posted yet, but they're going to have punter props. They're going to have, national anthem prop. Can't wait for your pick on that. But feeling pretty good heading into it. 18-13 now for the playoffs. And 2 of those losses were the top rung of a ladder. So, those were like plus 700. And then 4 of my losses have been by a half. But I did have one luck box play, which was the Pat Bryant under 33.5 receiving yards, where he almost cleared that on the first drive. And then, he was knocked out of the game. Luckily, he was able to return last week. It wasn't a long-term thing. But so 4 brutal beats and 1 lockbox win. Hoping, for 10 to 15 props for the Super Bowl is my goal.
Oh, yeah. And, I guess it was payback for getting the Brandon Cooks under the week before, but I had Stidham over 31.5 attempts, and he was flying over. And then this blizzard comes out of nowhere within like 2 downs of each other. And then Sean Payton finally runs the ball, and then Stidham, if he just doesn't throw that pick, he's going to throw another pass on the next play. If he had just waited one more play to throw right to the other team, he would have gone over. But that should have bet it when we talked about it on the show, because that's the thing. It's hard to bet as we're recording. And I think you said it was at 30.5. So that was essentially the difference. But,
Well, we didn't know the snow was going to be that bad. Our very own Kevin Roth said, look, I'm a meteorologist, and I had no clue that was going to happen. It is unpredictable, just like, sports betting is. But, yeah, that kind of caught people by surprise. We didn't expect it to be that kind of a snow out in the second half. But yeah, that's why the number matters, especially when it comes to something with like pass attempts. But yeah, and I don't think he came close to his 189 yards passing, right? Did he even clear 100?
No. And I mean, so I felt good about it because I went with the attempts. Yeah. I felt like that was the correct cap, but that did kind of hurt to lose that one just because it was so close. And then he also had the overturn on the grounding. It turned into a backwards pass, which is not a pass attempt, obviously. So yeah, that was just a brutal one. But looking forward to this one. You and I both do have bets locked in already. All picks that we make throughout these next 2 weeks will be tracked in the Action Network app. So be sure to go download that if you have not already. We won't start it with Cardio King this time because we'll talk about the Cardio Kings, which are the guys that ran the most routes without a target in their specific player sections this week for the Patriots and Seahawks, who in the conference championship. So we'll do it that way. So we'll just jump right in to quarterback Drake. Let's start with Drake May. It's simultaneous. I don't know about you, but my feeling on Drake May is on one hand, it's oh my God, this guy is scary. He could just single-handedly win New England the Super Bowl as an underdog, but at the same time, it's like, oh my God, it's scary. The offense has kind of played terribly for most of the postseason, outside of like a stretch against the Texans there. So,
Yeah.
how you feeling about May heading into this matchup with Seattle? Number one defense, DVOA, Broncos number 4, and the Texans number 2. So this will be the third straight top 4 defense that Drake May is facing.
Yeah, I think with him, when you look at his regular season stats, he was phenomenal. Led the league with 8.9 yards per attempt. Led the league with a 72% completion rate, but he was also tied for second for average depth of target downfield, 9 yards downfield. So it's pretty incredible. He led the league in completion percentage, and he was throwing downfield. That's just a lethal combo. So that's good for passing yard overs. And the Patriots had the 5th highest pass rate over expected. But they played with the lead 62% of the time, which was a league high. They were 14-3. They had the easiest schedule. So this all makes sense. So as rare 4.5, what are they, 5-point dogs by now? I'm expecting them to play with the lead at a 30% lower rate. So that should mean, he's probably going to drop back at a much higher rate than usual if the spread is correct. But like you said, he's going up against the top-ranked defense in DVOA versus the pass and the run. So it's not like they're a run funnel defense or anything. So I think, he's going to drop back a ton. With him, that doesn't always translate to pass attempts because he does scramble so much. But I think, something like his pass attempts will be much higher here than they typically are. And plus, his entire team was sort of due for catch regression. I hit that booty prop last week. Couldn't hit him on 5 of his targets. So I just think pass attempts, similar to Stidham last week, is kind of where I'd go with May, because I don't really know how efficient he's going to be against its defense, and he has been struggling. So that could all kind of lead to more attempts. And apparently he's dealing with some sort of shoulder injury, so we kind of have to monitor that. I don't know if that means he'll throw less or scramble less, but something to monitor for sure. And Seattle has been prone to, quarterback rushing yards. So, I think it's a game where he's going to be running a ton. So haven't really found anything I like specifically when it comes to May's props. But what are your thoughts on kind of like clashing versus, the top defense and how he's, played very poorly in the playoffs so far?
Yeah, so I'm targeting his rushing overs because, and I guess it's a little bit more risky because, if he gets hit hard on a play, he could check out for a few plays. He could get knocked out of the game. Seattle's defense is just, they hit hard. So it is risky, but I have Drake May over 40 rushing yards in this game. And the reason being is, especially with the Super Bowl, one of the things I really like to kind of dial in on is, like splits. And, because things kind of change over the year, especially, everyone's had their bye. Teams kind of switch it up. They kind of do scouting at the bye, and then in the postseason, it's obviously you have like your most important game. So it kind of reveals a little bit more about who you are, with recency or splits or things like that. Sometimes there's injuries. So with Drake May, he's got some pretty interesting splits. I'll give you a few. First of all, let's just talk about, the two young offensive linemen, Will Campbell, Jarrett Wilson. Both of them, or at least one of them, missed a stretch near the end of the year from week 13 to week 18. Campbell missed 4 games and Wilson missed 3. So in the weeks that both of those guys were in the lineup, Drake May actually had a higher sack rate, 10.7 versus 6.8. And he scrambled at a 10.4% clip versus an 8.7% clip when they were out. So we saw like Campbell just get beat off the ball crazy at one point, one snap last week in that conference championship game. So I think Drake May, I think those splits are a little bit telling. I mean, you do adjust a little bit because, some of those games are in the postseason, the competition level increases, but I think Drake May is going to be running for his life here. And if you look at going into, they had a late bye, so they were one of the last teams with a bye. I believe it was them and the Giants, right? So they had the week 14 bye. They played 7 games since. If you look at Drake May's rushing splits, night and day, going into the bye and coming out, it's almost like they said, all right, now it's go time. Like maybe he was trying not to get injured before, but on his scrambles, before the bye, he averaged 6.6 yards per scramble. And scrambles a lot of times happen on third downs. You have to get to a first down, so quarterbacks can still affect that. Like, you're not always trying to get the most. You're going to slide and stuff. So 6.6 yards per scramble going into the bye. Since the bye, 10.8 yards per scramble. But it's not just that. Design runs, 1.1 before the bye attempts, 2.0, nearly doubled in attempts over these last 7 games coming out of the bye. And his yards per carry on design runs went from 1.4 to 4.3. So he's just like doubled and tripled up his rushing production and efficiency and his designed attempts over these last 7 games coming out of the bye. So I've adjusted for that, and adjusting for that, the market has come up. I think Evan said he got Drake May his rushing over at like 31.5 when it initially opened. Now it is up to, let's see,
it's up to 39.5 at some books.
Yeah,
like 36.5.
I'm seeing a 35.5, and I'm gonna go bet that right now on the show, because if I leave it, I'm probably gonna miss it. So hopefully,
it's been going up a ton.
Yeah, but that's my that's my angle. Like, if I've tried it, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the pass catchers for New England, but I think it's really hard to find, I would say, an advantage for New England in terms of their receivers versus the Seattle defense. Now that the Seattle defense is healthy, I mean, they don't have, like, Stephon Diggs is great, but they don't have like a Puka Nacua that's just gonna do ridiculous things every time he's on the field. And Diggs is not running some of those deeper routes like Nacua does. So yeah, I think Drake May is going to have to run quite a bit here. So that's kind of my angle as far as May is concerned. Any thoughts on that, the splits or anything like that before we get out of here?
Yeah, I agree. I just say the market kind of already adjusted for that, but it kind of goes with my point where he's probably going to have to drop back a lot more here in a rare trailing game script. Seattle would a top 4 pressure rate. I know they're at least top 5, but they also don't blitz. And I'm looking right now, and he scrambles almost like twice as much when teams don't blitz. Mm-hmm. So it just seems like a lot of factors lead to him rushing. But like you said, it could lead to an in-game injury. He needs to get better at sliding. There was one play I think they thought is where he hurt his shoulder, where he just didn't slide very well and he got rocked. And like you said, Seattle hits hard. But this is the Super Bowl. I think he's going to put it all on the line here. So yeah, I think, something in terms of just rushing upside. Maybe like his longest rush prop. I haven't dove into that yet, but there might be an angle here where there's still quite a bit of value.
Yeah, I mean, I like the over on his median as well. It's as long as, I mean, I have it just over 40, so as long as you're still getting in the 30s, I'm fine with it. Because I think he also has that, like you said, that long upside where his 3 scrambles last week went for 57 yards in that conference championship game against Denver. He had, I think, 10 carries on the day. You would think he scrambled more than that, but when he scrambles, he generally is going to get yardage. And then you saw them, they ran I guess, what would you call that, like an end around or something, like that little keeper at the end of the game. So like they have designed play calls for him in these kind of important games. So I would think, especially given it's a shoulder injury, you would still want to use his legs more than the arm, because I think that's New England's best offensive advantage in this game, as it stands. But let's go flip it over to Darnold. Let's see what his passing line right now is. 227.5 at most spots. It's been consistent. May has come down a little more. He's at around 222, whereas think both of them are open around 230-ish. But Sam Darnold, great game in that conference championship against the Rams. Looked confident. Looked like Seattle was comfortable leaning into the pass game. And my question to you is, do you think that continues? And how quickly do you think Seattle would be willing to abandon the run and just put it on Darnold? Because like I've been saying all playoffs, you can't run on New England. So all this Kenneth Walker stuff that's been happening over these last few games, even with Charbonnet out, I don't know if they can get that going in this one. It'll probably be more of the same. So Darnold has the upside to have a huge game in this spot. Would you agree with that, or are you kind of looking at it more conservatively?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this is a good spot for Darnold. I think they still need to at least try to establish run because he does rely on play action so much. So they probably don't want to get into just like an obvious, drop back every play kind of thing. But similar to the Patriots, I have the Seahawks also expected to trail at a 14% higher rate. That makes sense because you have two teams making the Super Bowl. Both teams have typically been leading every game for the most part. So if one of these teams gets behind, it'll be a rare trailing game script for them. So we could see Darnold have to drop back a lot more. And unlike, May, he's not going to scramble nearly as much, although last week he did a couple times. But, with him, the oblique injury doesn't seem like a concern. He looked great, threw 346 yards. And, the Pats defense is more of a pass funnel. What do they rank? 25th in DVOA against the pass. I know they have Christian Gonzalez, but they just had a very easy schedule. So Darnold's going to be one of the better quarterbacks they've had to face this year, believe it or not. So yeah, his props started, I think it was like at 235. I think it's dropped 7 yards by now. I don't know why. I don't know, do we even know what the weather's going to be like for the Super Bowl? Santa Clara could be tricky, but I think it's supposed to be pretty nice. So, his over might be something I would consider just based on the fact he might have to drop back more. And like you said, it's going to be tough to run. So that's kind of where I'm leaning initially, but, not something I'm ready to lock in quite yet.
Yeah. I have him at more like close to the original number that it opened at. I have him at 233. So I would lean over now that it's down to 227. And I just think that kind of similar to the way the Broncos started the game against New England before the blizzard, I think New England's run defense is so good that it's a deterrent in itself. Like usually, opposing teams aren't really going to have too much of an effect on, the run pass rate outside of just the normal, how much are they going to affect the point differential, like leading, trailing. But like New England has, for much of the postseason just been discouraging teams from running. I mean, remember the Chargers? I think they got didn't they get a turnover or something and then got into the red zone and then just didn't run the ball with Greg Roman of all people, and then ended up with like 10 runs on the game, and then the Texans just couldn't get anything going. They tried to run it a little more after Stroud puked himself like 5 times, but Seattle, 2 weeks to prepare. They've been one of the better, probably right there with the Patriots is the best coached team this year. So I would be surprised if they bang their heads into that wall too many times. I think they don't want to get into 3rd and long, but I think they're going to say, okay, we have to throw on early downs in order to not get into 3rd and long. And so I think you're going to see a lot of play action because you can't let, the fear of running mess up your play action game. So I think they're probably just going to come out, super play action heavy, try to test the discipline of that Patriot defense. So that could lead to some. And the thing about the Seahawks too is they get a lot of explosives. I still think they can generate some of those. I mean, nobody's covering JSN. They could have maybe Arroyo plays. I think he would add a little bit more explosiveness than Sauber, obviously. But I don't know. He seemed like it was almost like a healthy scratch last week though, because they took him off the injury report. I thought when they activated him.
Yeah,
but I mean,
I don't know what's up. We could talk about that with Barner, but yeah, I don't know what the deal is there. Maybe just uncomfortable having a rookie play in that environment, but then seems like he'd be less likely to return for the Super Bowl, or I don't know what's going on there, but they could use some pop from that number 2 tight end. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's active for the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I think either way, if you're looking for like an angle that, like, because it's really hard to, outside of, I think, May rushing, it's really hard to kind of nail down exactly how the Patriots are going to even approach it. And then, who's going to have success, where the ball is going to go, who's going to be efficient, who's going to make plays, who's not. Because Seattle's defense is so good and they can just do so many things and kind of throw so many wild cards at you. Like last week, they played a lot more man than expected, but it's just McVay is such a genius that he countered with like 1-2 personnel on second and treated second down like third, and playing 1-3 the whole year, and now he goes to 1-2, and it just kind of threw him for a loop. So, but generally it's going to be tough to predict New England, but with Seattle, I think there's a good chance that it's a pass focused type of game, especially after Darnold played really well.
And I think when it comes to Darnold, we're typically just looking at his passing props, but one of the things that I'm probably going to be focusing on for this Super Bowl is quarter by quarter props. So there's a lot of players where I'm right in line with the market. How fun is that, betting on a prop that you're showing like a yard of value? But
hey, Ray McLeod would disagree with that.
Well, that's completely different. I will have bets like that, but I'm saying like I'm doing some deep dives on quarter to quarter and how I expect the game to play out, and I might have like overs on a player in one quarter and an under in another, which is going to be one hell of a sweat in my opinion. And so when it comes to Darnold, I was looking, he has yet to run the ball a single time in the third quarter, which kind of makes sense, but like the fourth quarter, obviously he's going to have a ton of rushing attempts because of kneel downs. Second quarter is the quarter where he's going to scramble the most because of the 2-minute offense. And you could still have a kneel down to end the half. So I'm not going to say they're only positive runs, but the market right now is kind of treating every quarter the same, where the under is minus 260 for him to even get a yard. So I've been finding some value kind of in these, not to give anything away, but I'm probably going to be attacking these like quarter by quarter bets, just based on expected game flow, what they've done this season. But Darnold's been kind of fascinating doing a deep dive in that department.
Yeah, and there's always a chance that he is more involved in the run game just because of how dominant the Patriots have been on the traditional, running back handoffs, right? Teams have gotten nothing, so they might do one of those plays where, like, I think Stidham did one early in I think it was the first quarter might have been the second drive of the first quarter in the conference championship, where they faked a handoff to, I think it was McLaughlin or Harvey, who went to the right, and Stidham just kept it and got 8 yards. So, Darnold he's not like the most athletic, but he's not, like, he can run a little bit. So I could see them kind of bringing out some, like, a weird play call for Darnold, like some called designed rushing attempt that they haven't even showed all year. Because again, very well coached Seattle team. So yeah, I think that would make sense with Darnold kind of deviating a little bit from his normal numbers. All right. Let's go from there let's talk about the run games. Both of these teams very good against the run. You mentioned Seattle's number 1. New England, what are they? Number 2? Let's see. Hold on, let me double check
and
that.
DVOA?
Against the run, what is New England?
I think it was middle of the pack. The thing with the Patriots is just they've had such an easy schedule, so any schedule adjusted is going to make them look, pretty bad. They're like 17th
in run. That's surprising. Wow.
But that's regular season, right? And that, again, it's really just downgrading them based on schedule, which you could argue isn't their fault that they played bad teams, but certainly they've been excellent in the playoffs. So I wouldn't call them middle of the pack. This is certainly something I think you don't have to take DVOA as gospel or anything, but in the playoffs they've been very good.
Oh no, now, okay, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's just so I'm thinking about them because Milton Williams is back, but remember he missed
Right.
5 games in the regular season. So yeah, we'll start with this, I guess. New England in the 5 games Milton Williams missed, he's their defensive tackle that they pay a lot of money to. In 5 games he missed, 147 yards on the ground allowed per game, 5 yards per carry allowed, and a 4.7% rushing touchdown rate allowed. The league average is usually around 3.5. With Milton Williams in the lineup, 15 games, 81 yards rushing per game. So from 147 to 81. That is a 66-yard decrease in a 15-game sample size. And then the yards per carry, 5.0 to 3.65. That's a $135 decrease. And again, a pretty significant sample. We're talking about 331 carries, in those 15 games that Williams has played. And then the touchdown rate goes from 4.7 to 1.2, a quarter. It quarters. Like that is absolutely some of the most just dominant splits for a player, being in and out that I've seen in recent memory for a defensive player. That is that is nuts.
Yeah, he's legit. And Robert Spillane was also out for 3 of those games. He's excellent run defense too. He picked up that ankle injury. I don't think we even know if he's okay yet. But I've been monitoring that. If he's out, I think that could hurt the run defense. I don't think there's any way he doesn't suit up for this game. But again, he's a player that got hurt last game, didn't return, and I haven't seen the update. But when it comes to their run defense, I think he's just as key as Milton Williams. So, if Williams and he are in the lineup, this is a very good run defense.
I still think Spillane is easier to replace. There wasn't a massive drop off even when he left that game last week. It was.
Well, it's hard to.
They were better.
The conditions were awful. But I think Gibbons missed a tackle on Harvey. I think it was in the passing game. I'll have to go watch that. But there was definitely a play where it's if Spillane was in there, he's down. But just they were without Williams and Spillane for 3 to 4 games there. And I think that's when their kind of season-long ranking took a hit. But I agree. I think overall they're probably a top 10 unit when healthy against the run.
I think they're best in the league.
Oh, you think they're the best in the league?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I have
top
them,
10 would be.
I schedule adjust too, and my number still has them as the best in the league with him in there. So that's why I was so curious about DVOA, but it makes sense now because it has to fact, and it's recent too. Yeah. So it's even related.
They had such an easy schedule. It's just there's only so good they could be that it's almost canceling itself out. So yeah, it's they had an easy schedule, but they were still very, very good. But I haven't seen anything on Spillane. Hopefully he plays, but I think he's key to their run D as well.
Man, that's been my go-to handicap the entire postseason. Well, the divisional round and the conference championship has just been New England's run defense is really good, and I feel like the market just hasn't been adjusting. So I'm just rolling with that. I've already bet a Kenneth Walker under. That's
what I'm saying. This is your
I have
segment.
Full confidence. I have full confidence.
You already have an official Kenneth Walker prop, so I'm just a witness to this right now. So I have nothing to add to that. I agree with it. I think his prop is 5-6 yards lower than when you got it
at 84.5, and it's down to 73, and that is around where I have the median. I have a little lower than that, but I could see Kenneth Walker ending with 10 yards on 15 carries, because remember, Kenneth Walker goes backwards a lot. That's why he wasn't just always the lead back under Charbonnet. So against a defense like this, if they get a couple of even on the touchdown run he had in the who did they play before the Rams? The Niners. The touchdown run, one of the touchdown runs he had against the Niners, he broke outside, I believe it was, or maybe it was last week, but it was a touchdown run he had in the playoffs where he broke outside and he ended up getting into the end zone on the dive. But that could have easily just been a loss against a team like New England, like a 5-yard loss. Like, so I don't know that Kenneth Walker even comes close to to getting like his rushing prop. He's been amazing, and we've been kind of on that, talking about that. And I ended up betting him for an anytime touchdown last week. He paid that off, but I just think this New England run defense, and I've seen this Vrabel's entire career when he has a guy like Williams. Like, I do agree, Spillane, important too, but it's just a great team defense, and the secondary, the line, everyone for the most part can do their job. But remember Vrabel in Tennessee when they would have like their defense, you wouldn't really think their defense is great. Like, they wouldn't come to mind when you think of great defenses, but then they would, all of a sudden you would look at the DVOA or whatever and be like number 2 against the run because it was Jeffrey Simmons and then a Vrabel scheme. Like, that's what we're seeing again with New England. So yeah, I would bet any type of Seattle running back over at, your own risk. Like, I think this could be a very different kind of game than Seattle's had most of the year when, well, I guess their run game struggled early a little bit in the year, but this, I mean, Woody Marks had 14 carries for 17 yards in that Houston game. Denver was inefficient. I think they ended with like 24 for 79 overall. Chargers had 10 carries for essentially nothing in the first game. Like, you're just not running on New England, I think. So
yeah, the only Walker, thing that I could say about Walker is he does run outside a ton, and that's kind of where, if there was a place to run the ball against the Pats, it's outside. But like when it comes to his attempt prop, like, you'd like the under there, or is it just efficiency you want to attack?
I mean, I want to attack efficiency first and foremost because he could get. I mean, Woody Marks had 14 for 17. If Seattle's still leading the game because, let's say, their defense comes and shows up and Drake May makes a ton of mistakes, or they get an extra possession because Rashid Shaheed doesn't return a kick for a touchdown or something like that, he could get like 19 carries for 50 yards. Like, I wouldn't be surprised
that's where, I mean, his prop like is still like 19.5, and that's last week. I think his prop was like 20.5. Which I was close to, but he's a player that he needs like a perfect game script, and he got one, and he still finished with 19 because, they like to mix in Halani. Halani still got 3 carries. Shaheed tends to get 1 or 2 jet sweeps. AJ Barner is their like short yardage tush push back, so like his rush attempt market is also kind of like limited in a sense. So I haven't touched any Kenneth Walker props yet, but I agree. I think the way to bet him is probably, under.
Yeah, I'm hoping his long carry goes up because I think it's at 15.5. That's getting dicey. He hasn't
14.5 at some spots now.
Yeah, that's about where it should be for the, it's, I could see him still going under that. He hasn't been as explosive over these last couple games as the workload has increased, but I think the yardage is the one where you could really, like, he could come way short. Because like the last 2 games, 19 carries in each game, and a long of 15 in the San Francisco game, and a long of 11 in the Ram game. So, teams are kind of, they're looking for the run, and he hasn't busted one. He's unlikely to do so against New England, but yes, still got 15, and the carries themselves make a long run more likely too. So it's the long run is dicey, but the rushing median, I think that's one where he could fall well short. And the no touchdown, I think last year one of my bets on convinced me was Saquon not to score, and Evan and I were talking on the early preview pod on Tampod. He was saying how that was one of the few times where the odds-on favorite for an anytime touchdown hasn't scored. I think it's like 5 out of the last 7. So Walker, I think he actually makes for a kind of like Barkley like fade in the touchdown market as well, because, like I said, his outside touchdown run, I think it was last week actually, that wouldn't happen against New England. I don't think. And then it's going to be hard to run an inside of them, obviously, with Williams still there. So. This
and
is a
AJ
game
Barner would probably get the 1 yard.
The 1 yard line. Yep. Anything, if it's late, all of them have been on third or fourth. So if Walker doesn't, Walker would probably get a crack.
He would get first crack on like first and goal from the 1 is what you've
if they run
seen.
If they run, because I was looking that up. That's another one I like to do the deep dive and just to kind of get the carry projections right. So Barner, all of his attempts have been on 1 yard to go, third or fourth down. So he would be that in that kind of situation, essentially like short yardage, 1 yard line. But and the thing is, and we'll get to Shaheed in the receivers, but I still think there's kind of value on betting like some of these like Shaheed unders and stuff, because the books I think are just like assuming that, okay, well now he's gonna rush more because Charbonnet's out or whatnot, where it's like last week it was even more. It was like 6.5 for Shaheed, and I was like, oh, whoa, that's high for a receiver. So there's a lot. I think Walker, and just like if you're confident in the New England run defense, a lot of kind of stuff opens up, because then there's actually some correlation there where it's like, okay, if Walker struggles, that means probably better for Darnold, better for just all the Seattle passing game. You can kind of bet your MVPs that way, because Walker, it's a wide open market outside of, even May is, I think over plus 200. Sometimes we see both quarterbacks under because they juice it up, but it's kind of wide open outside of the quarterback. So Walker is he's my number 1 fade. But I do want to talk to you about the Patriots. Well, first of all, Holani, do you think he continues to get like as much third down, like as much passing down work? Because him and Walker split passing downs last week, like 50-50.
He had one more route than Walker. Yep. 3 catches,
same amount of
27 yards.
1 more route. Yep.
He had a brutal drop though. He's tricky to project. Saw 3 carries for 4 yards. His rushing prop went up 3 yards. It was like 7.5. It went up to 10.5. Are you're perked up because you want the under?
Of course, I want all. Like I just see like them running into walls. Well,
okay, his longest rush prop. What do you think it is?
It should be 4.5, right?
It's 5.5, even money.
Ooh.
Now the concern there, I remember I had this with DeMercado earlier in the season.
Down.
Yeah, it's 3rd and 18. I'd be very worried about like Holani just ripping off a 10-yard run where the Pats are totally fine with that. Now it's 4th and 8. There you go. Congrats. You move the punt up 10 yards. That's my concern with Holani being in on 3rd down so much and fading the 10.5, rushing yards. So I've been kind of cautious pouncing on that, but it is enticing, and we'll see if it like moves up a little bit more. But like I could imagine if his longest rush prop gets up to like 6.5, I'd be pretty interested in taking the under there.
Yeah, I would consider the median, but I'm kind of waiting for it to max out, because it could, a guy like that, it could just tick up a little bit. He probably got more snaps than people realize, but most of them came in the pass game. He got 23 snaps and 20 were in the pass game, and then he got the 3 carries. So, and then, Walker was in on 23 run plays. He had 20 carries, I think 1 called back, and then Darnold had, 3 runs as well with Walker in the game. So they didn't seem interested in handing Holani the football, but I thought it was, he really hadn't played much on passing downs all year. So I thought it was interesting that they just kind of, put him in that high volume pass game like Charbonnet role immediately. So and they could change that this week too.
And Cam Akers played 1 snap. He was in to pass block on that Shaheed bomb. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Akers played a snap. So, there's a chance that like Akers could get a carry. Still kind of like volatile how they're handling it. But I'm going to probably pass on Holani rushing props. But like his receiving props might be interesting. They seem about right now. But the more I dig in that, I might find an angle in that direction. But he was definitely used kind of as like the passing back.
Yeah, it's just, I think with Holani, it just comes down to risk if you've already locked in some Walker unders, because now you're in a situation where Walker runs really hard. New England's run defense hits hard. Like he's another guy, I think higher risk than most to come down to, get knocked out of a game. And he and now he's like maxing out his carries and snaps. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my concern, because it's like with Walker, going under like 70 something, he gets knocked out. He could come way short of that. Whereas like Holani, he could do nothing, but if any little thing breaks wrong and he has to get, let's say, 7 carries instead of like the 3 we're projecting, 2 or 3 we're projecting, then you don't have that same kind of wiggle room. So yeah, I think
that's a great point, because
yeah.
Charbonnet, I know people in fantasy hate him that have Kenneth Walker, but he would take 7 to 8 hard hits that Walker didn't have to take, right? Because Charbonnet is getting those like tough couple yard gains, and now he has the full workload to himself. He is going to be more prone to injury. That's kind of why they do, and both backs are really good. Charbonnet is a very good back, but having both backs kind of keeps them both fresh and more efficient. So just a bigger workload, you could see Walker's efficiency take a hit as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that in that kind of situation, I think you kind of have to favor if you're just trying to fade like an efficiency, like the starter is generally going to give you more value there like than betting, like of the two, like you could still show value on a whole line under. That doesn't mean you necessarily want to put the same amount on it, if anything. Yeah. But let's get to the real fun here, because I don't know exactly who the Patriots' second running back is, because I did not see the Patriots take Ramondre Stevenson out of the game last week. I'm joking, obviously, but Ramondre Stevenson played 60 snaps and TreVeyon Henderson played 4 snaps. That has continued a trend of Henderson seeing a decreased role as the postseason has worn on. Now, I know he did get banged up at one point, and he had like a pretty sizable lead in carries in that divisional round game, and then Stevenson got, like, I think at one point it was 10-3 Henderson, and then Stevenson got like the last 16 backfield carries or something, and then he got another 25, and Henderson got 1 in this game.
Yeah.
So Stevenson's working with quite the streak of handoffs over Henderson. What do you just how are you kind of doling out the usage with, you could go so many ways, like depending on how much you weight recency. Do you use just the postseason? Do you use just last game? Do you go back more over the, since the bye, like since, in the games they were healthy? Like what are you even using as the relevant sample to project the snaps for these two?
Yeah. When it comes to this, it's very volatile. There's no like right or wrong way. But I'm definitely, bumping Stevenson way up based on recent usage. And he has been playing well down the stretch. I think it started, week 18 against the Dolphins. He went off. And then, he's seen his rushing share increase ever since then. I think last week, though, I think that had a lot to do with the weather, and Vrabel just trusted the veteran to just keep pounding it. They were just playing keep away at that point, so might as well just keep Stevenson in there over the rookie. But, I have him coming a little bit back down to earth here. And Stevenson's rushing yard under was the first bet I locked in at 56.5. He's down to 51.5. So, got 5 yards of value. But the reason for that was kind of what I said earlier with Drake May. This could be a rare trailing game script for the Patriots. I've been projected to trail at a 30% higher rate. That doesn't mean that they're like guaranteed to trail, but as a 4-point underdog, I just take the percent of game 4-point underdogs trail at, and I apply that to their season long rate, and it's a 30% higher rate here. So my whole point is there's probably going to be fewer rush attempts to go around, at least for the running backs. May might scramble when he drops back to pass, but those aren't technically, designed rush attempts. So I have the overall pie shrinking quite a bit. Plus, Seattle's is very good versus the run as well. They rank first in DVOA against the run. And I did a deep dive on Mondre's just, his skill set this year, and he's been excellent running against stacked boxes. He runs inside at a very high rate. So he's always been kind of a good power back. So he led the league with 6.9 yards per rush against stacked boxes. And Seattle actually used a stack box at the second lowest rate. They have that secondary where, everybody's excellent in run support. They have great linebackers, great defensive line. So they tend to use a 7-man in the box at one of the highest rates in the league. And that's when actually Ramondre struggles. He had a 3.1 yards per run against 7-man boxes. So Seattle will kind of let him get past the line of scrimmage. They're not very good at initiating contact. But once they do get first contact, it's really hard to get yards after the run. So he might pick up quite a few, 3 to 4 yard runs, grind it out. But this is a very tough defense to get explosive runs against. So it's one of those things where he could be struggling to run the ball, where they could either kind of use him in the passing game more, which I think they will do, or just, get Trevion a little bit more work, just try to get, explosive run if Ramondre is struggling a bit. So I could see Trevion having a role in this game. But either way, when it comes to Stevenson's passing usage, led the backfield with a 66% routes run rate last week. So it's not like Trevion's, he's not getting many carries, but he's at least factoring in the pass game. He's not really doing anything because Mondre's dominating the passing down work. So I think Ramondre could have a big game, as a pass catcher. But, Ramondre, I think it's clear that he is the lead back heading into this game. But I have him right around 13 and a half carries, and Trevion around 5.5. Is that kind of the split you have? And how are you kind of handling this kind of extreme shift in usage?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to really the bye. Coming out of the bye, Mondre just kind of retook that lead role, and he just outplayed Henderson. And I know maybe I'm sure there'll be some deep dives on it, and maybe there's something more to it that we just aren't privy to yet. But yeah, I have it. I'm just kind of using the postseason snap counts because that's when everything matters. Week 17, I know they had a weird game where a lot of receivers were out, and they ended up playing a lot of pass snaps with both of those guys on the field. And then obviously week 18, they're playing for seeding, but it's still week 18, and Denver ends up getting that 1 seed. So the postseason is where you have to say, okay, now this is relevant. And yeah, it's been Stevenson about about 68% of the backfield carries to Henderson's 32, and then Stevenson getting 75% of the routes, and Henderson 75-25 split in terms of the pass plays. So that's really where I have it. So I have Stevenson at 12 and a half carries, and yeah, Henderson at 5.5. I little over 5.5. Giving him a little bit of because I also look at the snaps. Because let's say May runs on a play where Henderson's in or Stevenson, so he got a little more credit there. But yeah, it's well in favor of Stevenson. I have him still playing about over 2/3 of the snaps, like a 70-30 kind of split at this point. I don't think he can really project less. And I agree with you on the passing game. I think that Stevenson could end up being the lead receiver in this game. If New England struggles, because May has shown he'll target receivers, his receivers, even in tough matchups. But if those passes aren't completed, it's probably going to come down to one of, I think Stevenson or Henry will have a big game, at least volume wise. But the fact that Henry is kind of the number 2 option in the offense, you would say behind Diggs, I don't think McDonald's he's not most defensive coaches that might say, okay, they've been kind of targeting Booty more, and we got to stop him, and it's he's gonna be like, okay, this New England offense was struggling and they couldn't get Henry the ball the last 2 weeks in the playoffs, so let's continue to treat him and make sure we don't give him too much. And that means it's just going to be a potential for an 8-catch Stevenson game where that's really the player. Those the Seattle linebackers in the postseason, especially, that's where other teams have been trying to go, because there's no weak link in this Seattle secondary. or really the linebacker or anywhere in the passing game. So you might as well just try to get, somebody on a linebacker, and the most likely player for that would be Stevenson. And like with the way Will Campbell is kind of struggling on the, at tackle, you might have to use Henry to chip or use him to pass block instead of Stevenson at times, because like Will Campbell was giving up a lot of quick pressures. I know you look at like the quick pressure rate, but he's in the postseason. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but just the eye test, like he's been giving up some quick pressures. So yeah, I think Stevenson would be that kind of outlet check down guy, and he'd probably be matched up on either Ernest Jones or Drake Thomas. But I mean, that's like about as good as you can do against the Seattle defense at this point. Just hope Ramondre can break some tackles, make some nifty moves, and be efficient in the pass game. But yeah, I think he's probably the most likely guy I could see having a big game.
A team-specific triple crown for the Pats would be Drake May, obviously leading the team in passing yards, but also in rushing yards, and then Ramondre leading the team in receiving yards. I wonder if we'll see a market like that. Like, just obviously, JSN would probably still outpace Ramondre, but I could definitely see that happening because, again, he's like Ty Johnson, but full-time, where he tends to see his targets downfield. He has an ADOT of 4.2 yards, tends to see like deep shots downfield, which is rare for a running back. So, he can maintain, very high yards per catch. And that's probably one of their best ways to kind of move the ball is, dumping it off to him or throwing to him. So could definitely see him, leading the Pats in receiving yards.
Yep. And like the whole thing with Henderson too is it's kind of interesting because I don't know if I expected this heading into the year, but Stevenson is much more dominant in terms of usage over Henderson in the pass game than in the run game. Like if Henderson's going to get increased snaps, it usually comes because they're giving him more carries. In the pass game, it's been like Stevenson getting, 60% most of the year. Like there was only a couple of outliers.
Vrabel has even said like he wants him in there to pass protect, right? That's got to be the reason. So yeah, he's already out there a ton because he's, pass protecting, being a pass catching back. You would think they'd give him some breathers with Travion, but I guess last week was such an outlier. It hasn't been that extreme. But yeah, last week was such an outlier. It's really hard to project. But either way, I do think Travion does close the gap a bit more in the run game, but not in the pass game.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of getting hard. Like every game is like one, it's just one data point. Obviously, you can say the postseason games are like more important or whatever, not. But it's like we were saying the same thing coming into last week. We were like, all right, well, Stevenson got like the last, like 13 of the last 15 backfield carries or something like that. He played a lot more snaps and he was more productive. So like, is that like, how are we projecting Henderson? And then it went from like Stevenson doing more last week than we thought to Henderson getting 4 snaps in the most important game of the year. So I think it's definitely worrisome, but the way I would attack that, number one, I think you could probably parlay kind of like you're alluding to, Stevenson rushing unders and passing overs, receiving overs. Like that's kind of correlated in itself, just game script wise. And then Henderson, I don't really want any parts of his medians, I don't think, because there's just so much uncertainty. But I do think, to your point, there's a decent chance that he is back up to at least, like a 25 to 35% usage rate, snap rate, share of the carries, whatnot. And with that, one of the most explosive players that will touch the ball in this game. So he could easily, like his rushing prop is in the, 23.5? He could easily go for like 70 or plus, even if he doesn't get that many carries, if he just breaks one. Now, I don't think that's likely against the Seattle defense. I think it's more likely against Seattle than it would be against New England. But I think, he's down to, he's down to, he's down to 18.5. I have him at like 20 in the low 20s. But yeah, his prop is 18.5, 17.5 at some books. So I don't really want any parts of that, even though I do project him a little bit over that, just because it's like a wide range of outcome. It's not a super thin confidence band projection there. All right, let's jump to wide receiver, and then we'll do tight end and get out of here. Obviously, we want to spend a long time, talking about the running backs, because I think those are some of the key handicaps in this game. Receiver, we could start with Seattle. What's your approach, Koerner, to the Seahawks? For me, I think it's just like JSN is like plus 550 to win MVP versus Darnold's like plus 130. I like those odds for JSN a lot, because Darnold's the guy who median's like 235, 230 passing anyway. JSN goes over 100 a lot of games. So that's really all I got there. I mean, I could see Bobo maybe getting more snaps, getting a long touchdown. But any thoughts on the Seattle receivers?
Yeah, I haven't even thought about MVP, but I kind of like that angle just because JSN is so much of their, passing offense. He could easily win it, where, he and Darnold both have a good game, but he catches every touchdown, so they just give it to JSN. It'd be even better if JSN, like, rushes in a touchdown. Kind of like T. Higgins, where we got that, Joe Mixon pass to T. Higgins to kind of separate him from the quarterback. But I like that angle. He could see, some Christian Gonzalez here, but JSN's so good, I'm not, like, downgrading him at all here because of that. So I'm expecting a typical JSN game here. Same goes with Cooper Kupp. Kind of a boring projection. He's been pretty solid down the stretch, but, as a number 2 target, there's only so much work he can see with, JSN commanding so many targets. So expecting a typical game from Kupp here. He could see an increase in targets if, Darnold shies away from JSN because Gonzalez is on him, but I'm expecting pretty much status quo for Kupp. But the most interesting projection, the guy that I'm not betting on one way or the other this game, is Rashid Shaheed, because he's the ultimate boom bust player right now. And he's operating basically at his floor when it comes to his like receiving usage right now. And he killed my prop earlier last week. I was very thankful of that, just catching that 51-yard bomb right away. But again, he's just been so little involved in the passing game, where, he can make an impact play as a return man or, as a runner on a design carry, that he's very tricky to project. He's still the kind of guy that, similar to what you're kind of saying about Henderson, I would only be interested in like alt overs at this point when it comes to Shaheed. I know you like his under for, his rushing yards. I think that makes sense. But taking like 20 plus rushing yards at 6-1 odds or something like that would be interesting as well. But he's a player that's almost impossible to project right now. He just has such a wide range of outcomes, but he could have a huge impact on this game. And he could be, I don't even know what his Super Bowl MVP odds are, but he
egregious.
Could be.
They're egregious.
Oh,
they're 20. Like, he's 28-1. He's like the 5th highest in odds.
Okay, yes.
It was like he's higher than he's twice as short as Diggs. Like Diggs was like 60-1. Shaheed as the number 3 receiver is 28-1. Like
I wonder what
nuts.
his odds of like just betting on a return touchdown would be. That'd probably be better than just taking MVP.
We'd have to go 2 to get it. So if you go essentially 2 touchdowns would be like around the similar odds. That's Evan and I were kind of looking into that. Just one. Everything for him is just kind of overpriced, as it's been.
As it should be. Yeah. He. Damn it. Okay, if it was like 50-1, I would consider that. But yeah, if he returns a touchdown, he'd probably also need to like catch a touchdown. And at 28-1, I can't get behind that. But again, he's one of those players where, if he has a huge impact on the game, I won't be shocked. If he finishes with 0 catches, I won't be shocked either. So, not a player. There's so many prop markets. I'm probably gonna have to pass on him for this one. We'll see though. We'll see if I find anything.
Yeah, I think with Shaheed, it's just a question of like I still think he's a good bet to kind of come in under his volume, because I think the books have been using like his full season numbers, where once, I think you mentioned it last week, but once he came to Seattle, his target per route almost cut in half. I mean, he was up near 20%, in New Orleans, as their true number 2 receiver, and here he's he's barely clearing 10% in most of these games. So I actually did end up betting a juiced up like under 2.5 last week on his receptions because
that was the market to take him in, was the receptions. I always hate, I don't think I've ever faded his receiving yards, but I hate fading players like that. But yeah, his receptions was like minus 190 to the under. They eventually moved it down to 1.5, and it was like plus 140 to the under. If they had done that before, that's probably the route I would have gone. But still a learning process when it comes to that. But I also said that I thought Elijah Arroyo's return could eat into his usage, and Arroyo was a scratch. And I also said, Bobo's kind of been making some noise. I made a side bet on Bobo to score. I told the Discord about it, but again, some of these things happen, and it didn't matter because he was wide open on that play, right? For 51 yards. So it all goes to shit at that point. But all of the underlying usage points to him just having a very, very low floor in this offense, and for good reason, because JSN is commanding so many targets that he's gonna see just a couple targets, typically downfield. Those are very low, catch rate type of targets. So again, very wide range of outcomes kind of guy, but we all know that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna bet his rushing under. So just for some perspective, I've seen that between 4.5 and 5.5. I think it could continue to go up if people get down on like Walker. But 11 games with the Seahawks now for Shaheed, and only in 2 of those games has he had multiple carries. So every other game he's had either 1 or 0 carries. So then you look at the yardage, because remember, receivers are more volatile. Like last week, he got a carry and it went for 0 yards. On the season, he's only been over 5 rushing yards in 4 of the 20 games that he's played with the Seahawks. It's 4 of 11, so it's a little better, but that's still a very low rate compared, to what the market's projecting. And then, again, this New England defense is still good. Like, it's not like they just are going to miraculously be terrible against like a wide receiver, a handoff that Shaheed gets so often that they're going to be prepared for it, essentially. So
yeah,
like I'm still I'm gonna be fading him, even though kind of that seems to kind of run counter to what I said about like Holani, but it's different because with this, I'm just really banking on like one play. Like if I can just get his one handoff to not go for whatever those yards, and he might not even get a hand. That's the thing, because again, Seattle, well coached, they switch it up when you least expect it. Came out in a totally different, I think, defensive game plan than a lot of people thought last week. You could easily see them. Maybe JSN has gotten a lot less carries since Shaheed joined the team. Maybe he's the guy that gets that wide receiver designed run this week. So yeah, I'm going to be fading his rushing, and his reception prop is at 1.5 now, right? It's not 2.5 again, or is it? Because he got targets last week. Let's see.
No, it's 1.5 plus like 120 to the under.
Yeah. Okay. So if for some reason, and I don't think it would, but he did get 5 targets, so that goes up to 2.5. Pretty much any juice. There is actually, I think there's a 2.5 minus 200 out there. I'm sure I show value on that.
It's the Super Bowl. I'm sure they're going to offer alt markets for everybody on reception. So
for the Patriots, my question to you is, well, number one, just who do you think their top, the guy that's the best kind of guy to look at in terms of the overs, and then just like how are you projecting the routes run rates for everyone, because Diggs dropped down. It was a low pass game, but Diggs dropped down to like 70% last week. Mac Hollins was playing like kind of like 77 to 80, but he was under 50 last week in his return. So is that kind of how you're projecting it this week, or do you have Mac increasing? Or
I think when it comes to the Patriots receivers, I think from a projection standpoint, it's Mac Hollins' return last week. So how does that impact things? And he had a 48% routes run rate. I think they were easing him back with that rate. I think he is going to be, I would say, between 55% and 70%. And I have it right at 55%. I think he's going to be on the lower end of that because they have been playing Diggs more in the playoffs. I think that's part of it. And I think the 72% rate is just they kind of had the game in hand. They were running it more. He tends to get a lot of rest in the fourth quarter. So I think that was part of it. But I think Diggs will be right back up in that 80% range this week. Or next week, I should say. But the guys that really, and Booty doesn't really see an impact with Hollins in the lineup. He still had the 83% routes run rate, still expecting him to be out there pretty much every drop back. The Matt can ding his target share is kind of how he impacts Booty, but it's Kyle Williams and Demario Douglas. Those are the guys that took the biggest hit with Mac being out there because, we saw both their routes run rate plummet. And the tricky thing is both those guys could make, a huge impact play even in limited time, sort of like Shaheed, where, I would probably be more interested in fading, Douglas's volume. So his reception prop is 1.5, but it's juiced down to minus 200 right now. And then Kyle Williams, are they even offering a Kyle Williams market yet? Not yet. Yeah. So, and Efton Chisholm was inactive. So Matt Collins' return definitely, shifted those three receivers the most. But Matt Collins specifically, he caught 2 balls on 2 targets. So he's a player that, I think he's going to do a lot of damage if and when he gets targets and he catches it. But, his reception market has been something that I've attacked in the past, but he could be tricky because, he is such a, high IQ receiver where a big game like this might target him more. But have you how are you projecting Mac in this game in terms of routes run rate and how that impacts everybody?
Yeah. So for the season, his median has been around 58%. So I have it 57.5%. So I'm right there with you at 55. And I came to the same conclusion. If you look at the games where just Mac is in there, a lot of times he's just being the number 1 or 2 receiver, and Diggs is getting that rate that Mac Hollins would usually get. And so there only could be so many receivers on the field at any given time. Last week it made sense that he dipped down even further because it was just a low pass rate game. So there's not going to be as much separation between your starters and your big guys Westover and those guys. But the one thing I think is interesting is Douglas, I think, would probably see last week it was Douglas and Williams pretty much even, 30% for Douglas, 28 for Williams. I think in a normal game script, Douglas would see about twice as many because if the Patriots are trailing more, they would go more 1-1, and that's when Douglas usually plays. Williams is essentially at this point the Diggs breather guy. And they might draw up 1 or 2, maybe a deep shot for him, but in general, it's when Diggs needs to check out of the game, that's generally when Williams checks in to the game. But Douglas, he would just have a role in that 1-1 package, which if they got to run a bunch of hurry up or whatever, he could have a much different game. So I agree with you. I wouldn't want to bet his medians maybe. I kind of look at some extremes one way or the other with Douglas because they've been leading the entire playoff. So it hasn't really even been a Douglas type of game, of script, but he's been explosive when he's been on the field. So yeah, I could see him making a big play. Williams, a little less likely, could happen, but if Diggs goes up, that I think that negatively correlates with Williams. So I would just look at Diggs because teams have been targeting Spoon a lot, and I feel like Spoon is going to see a lot of Diggs in this game. They're going to have those two guys match up a ton. So.
I think when it comes to the Patriots usage, if you look at Week 16 against the Ravens, I think it's gonna be that's the only game where everybody was healthy. Diggs had an 80% routes run rate. It was a game they were trailing at one point, right? So, if you're looking, Booty left that game early. I'm not sure how early he left, but if you look at that game, I think their usage is going to be very, very close to that Ravens game.
Yeah, it's not going to be. It's also pretty similar to if you just look at the postseason at large, but just put Hollins in that wide receiver 3 role. Like in terms of the routes, like it's, Hollins will be in the 50s, Diggs will be in the 80s, Booty will be in the 80s, Douglas will be in the 30s, and Williams, just depending on the exact game script, will be anywhere from like 5 to 25 or something like that. And that's how it is. Austin, we could go to tight ends. But yeah, I think like Diggs, I could still see Diggs going over receptions. Wouldn't want to bet his yards but I do think he'll get a lot of targets. Then Douglas for like big plays. That's how I'd kind of attack the Patriots. But tight ends. First, I guess the major question for the Seahawks is, does Arroyo play? Like, what would do you like? Are you projecting Arroyo for stats right now?
Yeah, I am, but the hell do I know? And Robbie Oots was out last game. Yep. Looks like he and Brady Russell are both questionable, so we don't even know what fullback they have. That could dictate, if both those fullbacks are out, maybe they want like Sauber or Collar up in that role, and then they probably would want Arroyo active, right? I just don't. Yeah, like I don't know why they held him out last week. Maybe he just wasn't fully healthy, but I know he had like a full week of practice, but he is a rookie, so maybe they just didn't want him out there. I haven't seen any coach speak anything about that, but as of now, I'm projecting him to return. But I'm not betting on anything. If anything, I'm pretty high on Arroyo as a talent. I probably would just take his receiving yards over. And if he doesn't play, then, he's a healthy scratch and I get my money back. But hopefully, this is one of those things where hopefully we know by next week what the deal is. And we know if he's going to be active or not. But I just haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, I like I think Arroyo, I think the touchdown, the anytime touchdown, and any overs if you like Arroyo, or just based on like if you're just trying to find bets, like I would bet Arroyo overs, because when every game that he has been active with Sauber, or just period, really, he's been the number 2 tight end. It's just that if only like now we have also a game where, okay, like Sauber, like, Arroyo it looked like he was healthy and he just didn't play. But it's been either or. It's never been like Sauber and Arroyo are both active and Sauber is playing ahead of Arroyo. So what's probably going to happen is, if Arroyo he's either going to not play or be the number 2 tight end. Like, there's not really a scenario where I think you're in a situation where, he's like in the caller up role. Cause I think that's the whole point. I think they caller up is like another blocker and all he does is block. And then Saubert, I guess they feel is maybe a little more balanced. Like, I know, he was known more of as like a receiving tight end early in his career, but looks like he put on some weight and got a little stronger, so they probably like him as a blocker more. So it could just be something as simple as that. But I would think he's active next week, just because I think the Seahawks are gonna have to go pass heavy. So I like Arroyo overs. Barner, nothing really there. Because he could get slightly affected by whether it's Saubert or Arroyo, because Arroyo tends to actually play a little bit more, and then the fullbacks kind of factor in as well, because when there's no fullbacks and no Arroyo, like Barner's like snap count is maxed out essentially, but he can get like a few more breathers even on pass plays so that's just kind of a wait and see for me. But New England, are you in line? I know my guy Stuckey loves Hunter Henry this week. Seattle has been a tight end funnel most of the year, but the only thing that worries me is like McDonald is so smart that they haven't really faced like a top tight end in the playoffs yet. So I could see him like, saying, okay, we're going to treat him like, we're going to put like I'm going to worry on him like they did Kyle Hamilton on Wash Kelsey a couple years ago in the conference championships. Like there's a lot of things that could kind of he's a high risk guy for me. But what are you thinking with Hunter Henry?
Yeah, I like the Stuckey play. Because Henry's only had 3 catches for 17 yards over the last 2 games combined. And this is a sneaky matchup for him because Seattle has been fairly vulnerable to tight ends. However, I don't think I'm going to be betting on his full game prop. I think I'll have some sneaky angles on him. So stay tuned for one of our many prop shows coming up. But I do like Stuckey's angle. I think I'm just going to have like a different path, ultimately leading to the same conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's I don't know where I am yet on that. Like I could see a scenario where it's like everyone's on him and like the market just goes too far too, because he is kind of I think him and Stevenson kind of stand out to me just based on what I've seen from Seattle. But I think Henry's just more at risk of like McDonald specifically scheming and saying, okay, he only had like a couple catches these last couple games, but that New England pass offense hasn't been great. So let's like keep that up. And you have all these, you have like, you're always playing safeties. But one thing to note though, because I think Austin Hooper is kind of sneaky here. Like if the Patriots want to, kind of maybe try to shorten the game or something, continue to go heavy. But his snap rates have been going way down since the bye. So he's kind of been the guy that has been, at the expense of like Douglas, Kyle Williams, and Jack Westover at fullback. They've been using less of that second tight end. So, Hooper, I could see him, potentially be a bigger part of the game plan like he was earlier in the year. Because like before the bye, it was like 40% routes run. And then since it's been like 27%. 27.5%. So, volatile guy, but I think he's an interesting, like, long shot touchdown. And Westover is as well, just because he's been playing a lot.
I was going to say Westover.
Yeah.
Had a 24% routes run rate last week. Not really out there to catch passes, but he's 40-1 in the touchdown market. One of those things where he's probably offering value, but he probably won't score situations. But it is the Super Bowl, so if you're going to have some crazy shit, usually coaches like to save that for the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I think Westover could be sneaky, especially if the Seahawks, vulnerability is sort of against tight ends. He would make sense as well. I'm looking at 41 now. There might be some books out there that have him like better than that.
Yeah, I actually have this true odds at 47-1. So, and that's like bumping them up.
Yeah, no. Well, everybody's fair odds are usually slightly below the worse than the market anyway. That's just kind of how the touchdown market is. But you kind of alluded to this with Walker. This is a game where we should see a ton of not to score a touchdown lines, right? You're gonna be hitting those.
Oh yeah. Starting with Walker, but yeah, I think, but yeah. I might end up bumping Westover up. It's tough to project him too, because he's actually the fullback. Really, like he's been splitting routes between like wide. I think he runs more routes wide and from backfield than in line as like a tight end. So it's like technically he's more like a fullback, but then he
like
also
a use check role.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But just because I think that it's hard to find guys on the Patriots that are like great bets, like that have a matchup advantage. You could see a guy like him get in the end zone. So yeah I think I might end up being on that one. Just just a little sprinkle, but
nothing crazy.
This was we didn't even get to kicker, but this was good. I'm gonna go make some more bets, edit some more projections, and hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Again, we'll be back. I think we have 4 prop episodes combined coming up over these next couple weeks here on Action Network. So be sure to check out those. And we will don't forget Fantasy Labs code FLEX20 for $20 off. First things first, though, we'll be back with Jill to do our favorite touchdown scorers next Thursday. And then again, we'll have props all week, episodes all week. We're bumping up we're pumping out the prop content. We know everybody loves props as well. And then, Stuckey and I will have the TAM pod with our game breakdown as well. And Sean, I know you'll have a write-up. Sean is on X at @_oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Enjoy the Pro Bowl. Let's get this money.